Hey guys, welcome back to the Life with Color podcast. I just wanted to hop on and let you know that this podcast is not only just on YouTube, but it's also on every major podcasting platform as well. So I encourage you to go ahead and like us, hit subscribe, turn on the notification bell, give us a rating, and also share this podcast on social media because this has an incredible message of hope and recovery from eating disorders. And the more people we can reach, the more that we can help and make an impact. So thank you so much for your support.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Life with Color podcast. I'm your host, Katie Noyad, and today we're going to be talking about how to get through and survive the holiday season. So again, it's holiday season right now, it's December, and this can be a difficult time for people who are struggling with eating disorders. But this year is also a little bit challenging because, of course, we're in the midst of a global pandemic. So it's going to be a unique and new year for all of us, and there aren't any rules written as to how we can move forward. So I thought this is a great opportunity to kind of start a conversation and give some ideas as to how we can best survive the holiday season and maybe even thrive too, whether you're an expat, whether you're not with your family for the holidays, or if you're struggling with an eating disorder or in recovery. So this is a 10-step guide to get through and survive and hopefully enjoy the holiday season this year. So step number one is really important, whether you are someone who has an eating disorder, who's in recovery, or who is just your average person. Always remember that food has no moral value. There are no good foods and there are no bad foods. Food is food, and basically all it does is give you energy to get through your life, to get through your day, really anything. So it's really important for us to remember that clean food or any of these labels that we put on it, that's just diet culture, and we need to remember that that doesn't apply to us because that kind of thinking can be really damaging. Another thing that I recommend is that when you are eating, to really try to enjoy each bite and to be in the moment when you are eating too. So what does the food taste like? What is the flavor? What is the texture? This is important so that we can really enjoy the food that we are experiencing and leave it at that. At that point we're content, we don't think about it anymore, and we can move on with our lives. So that's really important. Another thing that I want to mention is that we don't need to exercise in order to deserve food. This is something that I have learned through being in recovery and through going to treatment, is that, our society and cultural norms tell us that we need to work out or we need to get rid of this extra food, but basically that triggers disordered eating, and it's really unhealthy. So remember, when you are having maybe a little bit extra for Christmas or whatever holiday you're celebrating, remember it's not bad. Food isn't bad. All it's going to do is nourish you, and you don't need to get rid of it to be a good person. You're a good person no matter what. Remember it. And the food you eat doesn't dictate how you are as a person. So that is step number one. Really important to remember. And the next step that I want to talk about applies to everyone as well, and that is that we should be eating regularly and that diets don't work. And our bodies are so smart too, because essentially if you don't allow yourself to have the nutrients you need throughout the day, the next time you do eat, your body is going to latch on to all those nutrients and hold on to them because it basically thinks that you are starving, so it holds on to those nutrients for a later time. And your body's doing this because it wants to survive. It wants to live a really long and happy life. So again, we can't outsmart our bodies, and diets are really, really dangerous during this time. And with dieting, I recommend 2 episodes to listen to. The first is with Dr. Joy Zelikovsky, and in her episode she talked about how diets don't work. They don't work at all, and essentially 95% of people who do diet end up gaining back the weight that they had lost. Not to say that weight loss is good or weight gain is bad, not at all, but essentially what you're doing to yourself is harming yourself when you do restrict the foods that you want to eat and you want to enjoy. So let's just not do it this year, okay? Let's not do it ever again, and let's kind of, take care of our bodies. The second episode that I want to recommend to you guys for checking out is Savannah Wairinga. She is a dietitian, and in her episode she targeted a lot of diet myths and things that people believe and what diet culture tells us and what Instagram tells us. And she was able to give quick rebuttals as to what those impacts are on our body. So those are 2 great episodes, but again, we need to eat regularly. Dietitians say that's about 6 meals a day, so 3 meals, 3 snacks to have adequate nutrition. And again, don't diet. The third trick, or the third step that I think we all need to focus on, is to avoid body talk and avoid diet talk. The way I look should not be commented on, and the way you look should not be commented on. Let's all agree to stop talking about our bodies poorly, or talk about others poorly, or even in a good way. Even how our society sees compliments can be a little bit backwards, and I'll give you an example. So if someone says, "Wow, you look great. Have you lost weight?" That actually is saying that weight loss is a good thing, making yourself smaller is a good thing, and that's something that we need to strive for. But that's a really, really unhealthy message, and that's something we need to stop. And so when you hear those kinds of comments, there's a lot of different ways that we can look at it. But the other night, I was doing some research on this eating disorder support group that I follow, and one of the girls, she had posted something about boundary setting and responses during the holidays. So if someone does say, "Wow, you look great, did you lose weight?" We can quickly have rebuttals as to ways to kind of shut this kind of talk down. One comment is, "I choose not to focus on my weight. There's so many more interesting things about me." So that's kind of saying that we should not focus on our outsides, but actually our insides, and what we're doing for the world and who we are as people is so much more important. So I think that's a great way to shut things down. Another one is a little bit more sassy. "No clue, I don't weigh myself, so how has your family been?" So if you change the subject, that also sends a clear message that that's not something that you are willing to talk about, and it kind of shifts the conversation into something else. So I think that's a great one too. Another one is, "Nope, I just look and feel great." And finally, "I don't find that kind of question appropriate." So that really shuts things down, and it's really important to kind of stop these talks or stop these comments about bodies, because they are harmful, and if we keep continuing the circle, nothing's ever going to stop. So it starts with you, it starts with me, and let's stop these comments about our bodies. And the fourth thing that I want to mention is, if you find a support person, that would be really, really helpful. If you can find someone who is an ally, who understands what you're going through, who you feel comfortable with, this is going to really help you get through the holiday season. So if you're struggling with food, or have anxieties with meeting certain family members, maybe talk to another family member or talk to a friend and have them understand what you're going through in advance. So if it's Christmas that you're worried about, talk to them a week before and say, "This is where I'm at. This is how I'm feeling," and have them as kind of like a safety net, where if you are at the event online, or if you're lucky and safe in person, then you can always go back and talk with that person, whether through text or if they're there, you can pull them aside. But having that support person understand what you're going through, it kind of shares the burden, and it takes the pressure off of you. And just being understood and validated is really, really helpful. So if you can be an ally for someone, that is so important. And if you need someone to be an ally for you, communicate that. There's no shame in it. So yeah, step number 4 is just to find a support person or be a support person, and try to help everyone get through this time. Step number 5 is to set boundaries, and this looks different for everyone. But for me, how I set boundaries is by not overcommitting myself and listening to my body in times of stress. So for example, I'm someone who really, really loves to get involved with a lot of different activities, and pretty soon everything adds up and I start to get really, really anxious. And so when those times come, I know I have to take a few steps back, take a deep breath and say, "Okay, what do I need to do today? What can I wait to do until tomorrow? And what can I let go of?" So your body is really good at telling you what it needs and what it doesn't need. And so if we're good at listening to that, that's going to be really helpful in understanding what boundaries we need to set and what ones would be good for us to set too. In terms of online Skype dates, it might be beneficial for a lot of people to say specific times or specific windows that they can talk. And for people who do struggle with eating disorders, I will say that this is a really difficult time for a lot of people. Again, with everything revolving around food, and people often use eating disorders as a coping mechanism for stress or for trauma. And of course, yes, it is a mental illness, but in times of great stress, they come out. And during the holidays, maybe people see a family member who they had a little bit of a trauma with. You know, the eating disorder can come out in different ways. And so it's actually almost, I can see this being actually a good thing for a lot of people for it to be online, because it's a little bit more structured. There's a little bit of distance. And so understanding that, you know, everyone's year and everyone's experience is going to be a little bit different, but that's okay. You know, not everyone is supposed to have the same experience. So recognize that being online for some people is a good thing, being in person for some people is a good thing, and that doesn't mean anything. Neither way is better or worse, but this year, the ability to set boundaries and the ability to have a little bit more structure and maybe have a distance might be beneficial for some people. So whatever it is that you need, don't judge yourself. It's okay. And yeah, set those boundaries. Step number 6 that I recommend is to challenge your expectations. So essentially what that means is, you know, I'll give you an example for me. Every single year I go to Oregon and I celebrate Christmas with my mom and my sister. We go to Smith Rock, which is a beautiful, beautiful like nature reserve essentially that has beautiful mountains and gorgeous trails. There's a river and we go there. And, you know, my dog's there. It's kind of this whole experience and it's become a really lovely tradition. This year, of course, that's not going to happen. I'm going to be in Denmark this year as an expat, and it's not safe for me to go home. The numbers are too high in the US, and for me, it shows that I care by not going. That's how I see it. So I will be staying in Denmark. But my expectations usually for Christmas would be that I would be home, and I would share that with my family. So what NEDA says, or the National Eating Disorder Association, there was an article I read recently that I'll link below, but basically they're saying that, again, this year is going to look different. Go ahead and write out what your normal traditions and expectations are, and then write a second piece. And what this piece is going to cover what this year is actually going to look like. You know, just lay it out. So, you know, this year I'll be in Denmark, and these are the activities I'm going to do. This is what it's going to look like. What this does is that it sets yourself up to understand what's going to happen. You're not going to be disappointed, and it kind of gives you time to process things in advance. So if you're someone who thinks that this year is going to be really challenging on Christmas or for the holidays, it kind of helps you work through your emotions and work through the difficulties in advance. So when it comes to that specific day, it's not going to be as hard, and it'll be okay, and hopefully even really nice. So that's a great thing for us to look into. And again, I'll link everything down below, and also all the resources I've shared throughout this episode so far. Step number 7 is to practice self-care. And, you know, self-care looks really different for everyone. I'm sure what you do versus what I do is going to be different, and also day to day. What I always recommend people who struggle with body image or eating disorders to do is to start with self-care on social media. You know, check who you're following. Are you following people who make you feel good? Or are you following people who, after you see their photos, makes you feel badly about yourself? If it's the latter, just delete those accounts. Just delete them. Don't do it to yourself. It's not worth it. Go ahead and delete accounts that make you feel badly, and ones that are unhealthy and are perpetrating perhaps diet culture or unhealthy messages. And go ahead and follow accounts that have a little bit more diversity, or accounts that have a lot of body positivity, or even puppies. That's always a great kind of account to follow. So that was something that I definitely recommend for everyone. Another form of self-care that I think is really important is to be able to recognize diet culture messages and label them as such. And the other day I was watching this movie called Holiday. It's on the Danish Netflix, and gosh, you know, throughout the movie there were probably like 4 to 5 different comments that were made in the movie that were really, I would say triggering. They weren't they were diet culture, and they weren't friendly to all bodies. And for me, it was really important to be able to recognize those and say, "Ooh, okay, that's tasteless comment that is influenced by diet culture. It doesn't apply to me, and it doesn't apply to anyone. So it's really important for us to be able to label things so that we kind of filter out what kind of sinks in, because we can take these messages, and if we let them sink in, they can be really harmful. Another thing with self-care is that maybe self-care for you is connecting with your mom or your friend or, a relative or something. Use Zoom, use Skype, use Facebook Messenger, use anything, and utilize the technology that we have to stay connected with people that you care about. That could be self-care for someone, but maybe that is not, helpful for other people. So maybe go on a walk, do whatever you need to do to, care for yourself. So again, my tips are to, cater your social media well, and to practice labeling, but self-care can look differently for everyone. So the way I do it is not better than the way you do it. Just remember what you need to do to take care of yourself. It's so important. Step number 8 is to basically be flexible and be in the moment. People who have strong all or nothing thinking, black and white thinking, or who are very perfectionistic need to take a chill pill right now and just, go with the flow. If anything, 2020 has taught us how to pivot and how to be flexible. And I'll give you an example. So my school has shifted to being online. And if I were so rigid, then that wouldn't be okay, because it's kind of like tough cookies. My school's online right now, and you have to go with the flow. You have to be able to bend and be flexible and to not judge the experience, because again, this year is unprecedented. It is unique and different, and we have to learn to be flexible and be okay with it. It's not going to be black and white. It's going to be a full color spectrum of experiences, and that's okay. Don't judge it, just go with it, and also take care of yourself in the process. And step number 9 is to practice gratitude. And I recognize that this year has been really difficult for a lot of people. Right now, not being able to travel to see family members during an important time, that can be really hard. Some of us have lost family members. Other people have lost their jobs. And it's just important to, care for yourself during this time. I know I keep saying that, but it's so important. But also, despite all the horrible things that have happened, there's always something that is positive that we can look at to be thankful for. Whether that is the fresh sprout of a flower during the springtime, or seeing a dog on a street that you like, or truly anything. Sometimes it's the smallest things, but if we can focus on those and learn how to be thankful for those little things, that can be really helpful. And studies show that if you practice gratitude, and if you practice being thankful for things, and you write down what you're thankful for, it actually increases overall happiness levels. So I recommend, if we journal, if you just write down one thing, or even just take a mental note as to what you're thankful for, that can really help make the holiday experiences a little bit more positive too. And the last step is to be kind to yourself. Kind of the whole theme of this episode too is to care for yourself, have self-care, and not judge yourself for anything that you're going through and how you're reacting, because there's a lot of emotions and there's a lot of hardships that are happening right now. And so if we're able to recognize our emotions and not stuff them down, not numb them, but recognize them and validate them and actually feel them, that's going to help us process them a lot faster so we can move forward. So again, don't judge yourself. Know that it's okay to struggle, and that this moment shall pass. This too shall pass. Another thing that we can do is dialectic behavioral therapy, and that's basically just changing the way that we're phrasing things. So, for example, we can say, this moment in time is really hard for me, and I'm going to get through it. I'm still a good person. So instead of saying but, it kind of connects the two things that say they have equal weight, they're not opposing, but you can get through with both of them together. So the last thing is just to know you're not alone. Again, this is a really difficult time, but there's so many people going through it. We're all going through this pandemic together. And there's a lot of people out there who have eating disorders or who are in recovery. And I know I'm someone who, if someone is struggling who's listening to this podcast right now, I welcome you to message me, message this account, And I'd be happy to share resources or just listen, because, you know, you're not alone. No one is alone going through this. So I just want everyone to know that they're okay, to not judge themselves or their feelings, and to know that, yeah, they're not alone. There are people out there who care about them and want them to do well and to be okay. So overall, that was my 10 tips and tricks for surviving this holiday season and hopefully thriving. I really hope that this was helpful and will help you get through this holiday season. And again, I'll leave all the resources I mentioned down below, and have some great resources for you to move forward as well. So everyone, take care. Thank you so much. Have a great holiday season, and I'll see you in the new year. Bye.